Europe wants war with Russia. Why? Because they have a choice. Either they go to war and they're stabbing Trump in the back for every possible peace negotiation. If I'm Putin, there's no way I'm going to agree to war when I see what they're doing. Europe has tried to invade Russia 3 times. Russia has not tried to take Europe. Why? Because Europe doesn't have anything. All right, they have to buy their energy from Russia. All right, they have no gold reserves. What are you going to get out of this? Just look at military history. Alexander the Great. The troops basically shared in the spoils.
Europe's political crisis is moving into a dangerous stage, and Martin Armstrong argues that the real story is not simply Russia, Ukraine, or diplomacy. It is the collapsing financial structure behind the governments that is pushing the conflict. Martin Armstrong, a cycle analyst and geopolitical forecaster, explains that Europe now faces a brutal choice: either continue pushing the war narrative or accept the consequences of debt, pension, and public anger. He argues that European pension systems are heavily dependent on government debt. Years of negative interest rates have already eroded the saving base. Armstrong warns that when governments run out of options, they do not simply admit failure. Instead, they look for a crisis big enough to justify emergency powers, asset controls, and more centralized authority. He connects this to historical patterns: Germany's post war confiscations and modern talks about using private assets to fund war. Armstrong's predictions is stark. If Europe cannot keep the war narrative alive, political pressure could explode. He specifically predicts a surge in unrest, breakdown in institutional trust, and intensified financial crisis as likely consequences. Now, we present the clips from Martin's interview. Before we discuss this, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell icon. Thank you and enjoy the video.
It's true. I mean, I have one fellow that works for me, and he was in Vietnam, and look, and he saw the stuff that I had published out. I mean, you had Johnson knowing he lied. There was no attack. He even said, I think the tapes are out. For all I know, they were shooting at whales that night. Starts Vietnam War. You have McNamara and his apologies on YouTube before he died. And he's got us into Vietnam, and 58,000 American soldiers died, and how many millions of other people. And he said, "Oh, gee, sorry, we were wrong. We thought Russia was involved. It was just a civil war. Weapons of mass destruction didn't exist. Lusitania. It goes on and on and on and on. I mean, as Butler said, and that war is a racket. I mean, they make money out of this stuff. Europe wants war with Russia. Why? Because they have a choice. Either they go to war and they're stabbing Trump in the back for every possible peace negotiation. If I'm Putin, there's no way I'm going to agree to war when I see what they're doing. And because if they don't do that, then they're, it's a tragedy waiting to happen. All your pension funds, 70% on average must have government debt. They took interest rates down to negative in 2014. I said, you're strip mining the money from people's pensions. All right, you had Ursula come out and says to fund the war, admitting they will confiscate people's private assets. They said, oh, it's unused. Oh, so you got some cash savings. You're not using it right now, so we'll take it. This is what Germany did. This is why the hyperinflation took place. It had nothing to do with printing money. The printing of the money that people talk about, all BS. That is the response to what I'm going to tell you. In December 1922, and you can buy these bonds on eBay, they couldn't make the reparation payments, so they confiscated 10% of everybody's assets. All right. Then they gave you a bond, which they defaulted on. That set in motion the hyperinflation in 23. Anybody that had serious wealth got it the hell out of Germany. All right. Transferred it to every Swiss francs, whatever. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he passed a law and said it's illegal for a German to have an account outside the country without government permission. That, what he was doing was trying to get the money that fled in 1922 back to Germany. 1934, just a few months after that, what happens? Switzerland creates the numbered account, secret number accounts to protect Germans. I mean, it's all there. It's not, hyperinflation was they printed money. No, they printed money because everybody left. Right? That's really why it was the response to. But what comes first? It's, the chicken or the egg stuff. Just look at it. And so Europe needs this war. Otherwise, they default and the people are going to be taking pitchforks and storming the parliaments. Simple as that. All right. You're looking at their futures, their savings. It's all been corrupted. And for Ursula to even come out, and you can Google it. I was shocked that she even said, if they can fund the war by taking unused assets. Unused. So, look, this is what they do. This is what they need war, and they don't care about who dies in the process. And anybody that thinks that, Ukraine, come on. Boris Johnson hopped on the plane. There was a peace deal. He went over and told Zelensky he's not allowed to have peace. That made the front pages of the Ukrainian Pravda. All right. I speak to Ukrainians. Once that happened, the question I get, are we allowed to have peace without permission from London and Paris? They're not in charge of their own country. Zelensky is an absolute traitor. When he ran for office, he vowed for peace. The death toll was 130,000. It's now 1.2 million. So much for peace. And 8 million have fled the country. Our 2 employees that were there in Ukraine are both in Berlin now. And most of them I talk, they're not interested in going back. It's just a mess. It's just a total mess. And I get frustrated because I have to deal with these governments. And I see how stupid this is. And sometimes I wish I was just one of those people with a mask on driving by myself in a car with the windows up and thinking everything's fine, But I don't know. It's just, it's an economic disaster waiting to happen. And they need war to do this. One thing about war, as kind of Butler was talking about, all right, it has to be profitable. Like Iran, Halliburton made a shitload of money when they were going to be investigated. What did they do? They resigned their American citizenship and moved to Dubai so they couldn't be subpoenaed to hide all the corruption from the Gulf War. When Japan went into Manchuria, why? Because they had no resources like Germany. They were buying all their energy from the United States. All right. There was a big investigation by the Senate. You can Google it and look it up. Because then they found out that we had broken the Japanese code. FDR knew when they were going to attack Pearl Harbor. Pulled out some of the key ships, left others there to die. It was the only way he could get us into World War II. He put sanctions on Japan, cut off their energy, froze all their assets in the United States. This is all before Pearl Harbor. All right. And there's a Senate investigation on this because we had broken the code. And you can see on my site also, I think it was the Honolulu Tribune or whatever, a few days before, it was a leak. It printed newspaper front page, we're going to be attacked on the weekend. All this shit's out. They've never told the truth about one single war to date that I can find. And, this is a day that lived in infamy, Then he got us into World War II, which he was trying to do all the time. Look, this is just the way it is. They will never tell the truth about war, any way, shape, or form. And Japan went into Manchuria to get the assets. They had all the energy, everything they needed, because the U.S. cut off and put sanctions on them. Does Russia want to go into Europe? Absolute total BS. Europe has tried to invade Russia 3 times. Russia has not tried to take Europe. Why? Because Europe doesn't have anything. All right, they have to buy their energy from Russia. All right, they have no gold reserves. What are you going to get out of this? Just look at military history. Alexander the Great. The troops basically shared in the spoils.
The deeper warning here, governments often use war as a financial escape route when they cannot solve their own debt problems. Armstrong argues that leaders rarely tell the public the full truth about conflict. He believes governments use moral language to sell wars, while money, contracts, and political survival operate behind the curtain. He points to Vietnam, Iraq, Pearl Harbor, and other examples. Governments repeatedly craft narrative to pull populations into conflicts they would never freely choose. He argues that Europe rejects peace because peace would expose the economic disaster underlying the system. Armstrong sees Ukraine as part of a larger power struggle, not just a battlefield. Political decisions made far above ordinary citizens result in death, mass migration, and destroyed economy, the human cost. Now, let's get back to the interview.
You can see it, kind of brewing everywhere. People are just dissatisfied with the form of government that we have. They tell us we live in a democracy, but we do not. This is a republic. Nobody asks us, shall we go to war against Russia? We don't vote on stuff like that. Vietnam, you were 18, you were old enough to hold a gun and go kill somebody, but you were not old enough to have a drink, or vote. But that's democracy. You take Ursula, the head of Europe. She's never stood for an election. In parliamentary systems, others just appoint who's going to be the head. Like in Canada, Carney, nobody, Carney didn't go in some preliminary election to say he's going to be the candidate. So parliamentary systems are even worse than what we have. At least there's a primary, but even that, this time, the Democrats didn't like that, and they scuttled it. They just put in, Camilla. I mean, early on, I warned RFK. The information I had that they were not going to allow anybody on the ticket to even challenge Biden. Oh, come on, they couldn't do that. They did it. Then he was going to run independent. And I said, I'm telling you, this is all rigged. They're not going to let you in there. And I was supporting him. I said, you might as well join Trump because they're not going to allow you in. And then New York kicked him off the ballot as an independent candidate, and that was it. He then joined Trump. I had known before that Trump and RFK had met, and Trump gave him a commission to head on vaccines back in 2016. And all the pharmaceutical companies threatened Congress, and they're going to cut off all their funds and donations, etc., unless that was shut down. And they shut down that commission about 3 months before the COVID vaccine. So I knew there was at least a connection between the two, and then I was like saying, you're not going to get anywhere. I don't know who's telling you, you can win as an independent, all that. You're not. This is not going to work. But, so the form of government we have it's becoming more and more corrupt with each passing day. I mean, the Democrats had no right to even vote for who would be a better candidate. Camilla, that was it. And, you have to vote for her because you're a Democrat. And that was basically it. There was no primary. Now a whole bunch of people standing up, I'm better than her, or whatever. They just wouldn't allow it. This is what we call the deep state. They have power, and they don't want to give it back up. Biden was not really there all the time. That's the dispute over the auto pen. Did somebody just run them through the machine, or did he actually even read them? It's I think that should be illegal anyhow. But you don't use an auto pen for legislation. You just don't. And Look, I was part of the vetting process back in the 90s, and then they would send me in to go meet with whoever wanted to run for president. I would meet the various different people from like Ross Perot and like governor of Oklahoma at the time. And then I was asked to go down and meet with Bush Jr. I said, okay. And then I was told, this one's different. Because before I would be asked, what do you think? Do you think he's smart enough to handle the job? I would be there to explain how the world economy functions. But with Bush Jr., they said, oh, this one's different. I said, what's different? Oh, no, he's really stupid. I said, what? And I said, why would you make somebody stupid president? This was exactly opposite of everything I had been doing for years. And they said, well, he's got the name and we can win. And I can tell you, because I was in the middle of all this, I was offered to be the chief economic advisor in the White House. I said, no, I'm not giving up my company for that. And they picked the cabinet. They picked Dick Cheney, not Bush. Dick Cheney was really the president. He's the one that took us into Iraq and everything else. And his former company, Halliburton, got all the contracts. I mean, it just corruption after corruption. And so when Trump went in the first time, they said, oh, gee, you're not a politician. You don't really know how this works. You need qualified people. And they stuffed his cabinet with all the neocons. Like John Bolton, who would invade Canada to get to Russians, And that's why this time Trump picked his cabinet before he even got to Washington. He said, you're not going to do this to me again. And so what do you hear the deep state saying? Oh, his cabinet's not qualified. They have no experience. Exactly. That's what you need. You don't want somebody else from the deep state there protecting everybody else that's there. And that's how Washington works. So I think as we head into 2032, more and more people are beginning to see this problem with republics. And they're just the most corrupt form of government, period. Because you have representative. And they can say whatever you want to hear to get elected.
Armstrong's broader forecast is that public trust in government will continue break down as we move towards 2032. He argues that peoples are beginning to understand that many Western systems call themselves democracies but operate through representatives, unelected officials, party machines, and deep state structures that protect their own power. He uses the United States and Europe as examples where insiders give voters only the appearance of choice while they decide major actions: war, debt, candidates, policy. In Europe, he highlights how unelected leaders and parliamentary appointees control outcomes. In America, he emphasizes that parties block challenges and establishment interests shape cabinets. The key prediction is not just financial, it is political. Armstrong believes the coming crisis will expose how deeply the current model has corrupted. War, pension, sovereign debt, private asset risk, and public anger all connect in one cycle. His message is that governments may try to redirect pressure outward through conflict. Share your thought about this interview in the comment section below. If you find this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell icon. Thanks for watching.